I start breaking down the various appropriations markups, I want to do an in-depth overview of the appropriations process from start to finish. A lot of these steps have already happened earlier this year. I'm going to tell you where we are right now, where we're headed, and where some of the hurdles and intrigue is going to be in the process. Towards the beginning of the calendar year, the president is going to put in his budget request to Congress. You'll have heard it referred to as the skinny budget in the beginning of Trump's term of this year. This is the budget that he puts together with the Office of Management and Budget, or OMB, and submits to Congress for consideration. Interestingly, this part of the budget process tends to get the most press, even though it has absolutely no legal ramifications whatsoever. It's really just a way of signaling to everybody what the president's priorities are for funding. Once that request is put in, that's when the Congress will start scheduling subcommittee hearings. There are 12 subcommittees underneath each appropriations committee in both House and Senate. They are identical subcommittees. They're almost completely identically named. And those subcommittees will hear from White House officials, agency officials, other witnesses, including other senators or representatives in the House, on the various budget line items and priorities. So for instance, the Librarian of Congress was brought before the Senate and House Appropriations committees. Most of the time this past spring, when agency officials and other officers were being brought before the Senate and the House, they were actually doing so under the auspices of this budget process, not necessarily because of a special hearing or something for whatever was newsworthy that week. We just have such a lawless and insane administration right now that everything ended up being a newsworthy week every single time there was an agency official that happened to be in front of Congress. The subcommittee hearings are pretty much wrapped up, and now we are in the appropriations markup process, and that's happening in both the House and the Senate. The House has finished about 6 of these. The Senate did 2 of these today. One of them they were supposed to do today, but that's been tabled until Monday. More on that later. The House has about 6 more to go, and the Senate has 9 more to go, 10 if you include the one that had to get tabled, the Commerce Bill. These are technically 12 different pieces of legislation, and there's an iteration in the Senate and an iteration in the House. Traditionally, these things would start in the House and make their way over to the Senate for amendments. That's just traditionally how budgetary items have worked. In more recent years, though, what's happened is appropriations in both House and Senate have started their work separately, albeit with lots of similarities based on the president's original request, and then they start marrying them together through floor proceedings. Usually these things originate from the House floor. Budgetary items almost always are going to have the HR, House Resolution Bill number. And then there will be Senate floor proceedings, and they'll go back and forth as many times as necessary through either the amendment process or, if totally necessary, a conference process where the appropriations committee members will get together in conference, hash it out for a little bit on whichever bill, whichever the 12 bills they're fighting over, and then take those things back to both floors for final passage. Remember, the House floor and the Senate floor have to pass an identical version of each of the 12 bills. Now, congressional leadership also has the option of doing what's called an omnibus bill, meaning they basically put the 12 bills together into one large budgetary package. And that's usually for simplicity of getting it through both floor proceedings. As you've seen from all the previous Big Beautiful Bill stuff, just getting one bill through can be a huge nightmare. The Big Beautiful Bill was an omnibus bill because it had a bunch of legislation from multiple committees, multiple areas smashed together. Now, there has been talk in this year's budgetary process of keeping them as separate pieces of legislation or only grouping certain bills together and keeping some of the more controversial bills out of the way, because if they go the omnibus route, that means that they have to get it all over the finish line, remember, by that 9/30 deadline, September 30. And if the Democrats start playing hardball with any of these bills, remember, they have the power to do that because you need 60+ votes to invoke cloture. That ends debate in the Senate and gets the bill to the actual vote itself on the Senate floor. So it's going to be interesting to see whether majority leadership decides to try to do this as an omnibus or whether they try to pass them separately. A lot of that is going to have to do with timing. Do they have everything ready to go soon enough to do it separately? Some of these titles end up interacting with each other, and so they can't actually be passed separately that easily. This is going to be a huge mess, and I feel like my whiteboard's going to get a huge workout in the next couple of months. Once both House and Senate floors have passed an identical version of the bill, whether it's the 12 separate bills, chunks of the bill, or a complete omnibus bill, it goes to the president for signature. The president does have the option to do the veto, and in that case, it would head back to the floors of both chambers, House and Senate, where you would need a supermajority, 2/3 of each chamber, in order to override the presidential veto. I'll pin this video to the top of my profile so that you can refer to it as we start to follow the appropriations process from now through the end of September. It's going to be wild. The Senate versions and the House versions have some key differences that we're going to go over. And of course, there's always the big question of how Democrats may use this process to combat the Big Beautiful Bill, the rescissions package, or just punish MAGA for their fascist takes. Stay tuned for more.